And then it's my pleasure now to welcome back to the stage someone who we heard in our panel discussion a bit earlier this morning, who's going to share with us some of his experiences from New South Wales, and obviously with the benefit of being a few years ahead of us in terms of implementing new legislation over there. So Dwaine is the Deputy New South Wales Resource Regulator. He's going to share with us his insights into what's been happening in New South Wales with regards to implementing the legislative reforms there, really focusing on some of the complexities involved in the regulatory environment, what lessons we can take from that to apply nationally and of course here in Western Australia. So would you please welcome Dwaine Jones. Sorry, I should mention too, time permitting, we will have an opportunity for Q&A at the end as well. So just depends how long Dwaine talks for.
Thank you very much. I will try to get through my presentation so you can ask me lots of questions and whatever you want to know. I don't regulate you, so feel free to ask me whatever you want, to be quite honest. So my presentation is about, I guess, for us as a regulator, how we regulate as today. It's been a big journey for us. I would say it's been 10 years for us and how we started off to where we are now today. There's a lot of lessons learnt along the way, a lot of, I guess, clunkiness and what was good, what was bad, and what was indifferent. And if anything you can take out of this is the journey that we went on, and it is a journey, and what you probably should do up front, what you can probably just skip through to what we did, and then, to make up your mind of where you're going to start and finish at. Some are good, some are bad, some you probably can't not do, but in the end, you need to do what's best that suits your business as well. That's pretty much what I'll discuss briefly through. So it'll go through then what the reform caused for us, through to how we do critical controls and how we verify them in the field as a regulator now as well. So back to, as I mentioned too, we had a major reform which was triggered off by multiple fatalities in our industry back in 2014. So we got a person came in, or essentially a company came in, and what they were asked to do was consider what the current industry circumstances were, so what was leading to these, what the contributing factors were, and any systematic or underlying issues that was causing these failures, because as everybody knows, most people aren't getting killed in any new way. Like the same thing that killed people yesterday still kills people tomorrow. The review made 3 major recommendations which literally now shape the way that we regulate as an industry in New South Wales. And that was develop a framework for a risk-based intervention. So we are basically a risk-based legislation, so then we need to intervene based that as way. And based on the risk as we see as a regulator to the industry as well, and because we're a high-risk regulator in New South Wales, we only focus on mining, what is the best value for us as a regulator? Where's a big bang for the buck that we can make sure people go home safely as well? Considerations of human organisational factors. So when we unpack the whole lot of it, there's a human and organisational factor that occurs in nearly every incident that we have. And to seek to understand that and what we need to embed in our process to make sure as an outcome we've had an incident is that was considered, and what drove that person either not to put their harness on, to pull out in front of a truck, all these things that humans do because they're humans. Why didn't they make the two-way conversation? So to embed that kind of process and that kind of mindset into how you are going to manage that hazard properly now. Because you can say whatever you want up until you intervene with the person, and then how that person will act is always differently, depends on circumstances, whether it's sleep, fatigue, home life, etc. So it's important to know when you have incidents and how you can try to resolve that as well and have controls in place. And the other big one was how we collected our data, how we analysed it, and more importantly, was it quality data, essentially. So as a regulator for the whole state, we had an enormous amount of data, but what's it good for if you don't use it for all the purpose you want it for? And you can only use it for the purpose you want it for if you've got the end in mind. Findings of the review. So basically, this is literally the biggest change we made since organisation. That's what we end up with. We end up with an intervention strategy which focus on 3 main pillars now. One is quality information, make sure the information was getting was A, the right information that could inform us was what was happening in industry, whether it be incidents through to near misses to other events, through to how we use that information as well to drive our behaviour and how we go regulate you as well. The human organisation factor was another one, as I mentioned on, and the risk-based intervention, which is where we literally sat as a regulator and going, as we've got, I think it's about 80 people in our regulators over there, 61 inspectors. We do all 3 sectors, so coal mining, underground metalliferous mining, through to small mines, your mum and dad quarries. That's the total number of people we have. Where is the best bang for our buck for a risk-based intervention approach from that? So, as part of that as well, so the other thing we did is, and I mentioned it yesterday with the other ones as well, is that as part of the intervention strategy is what we wanted to set up. We set up a central assessment unit. So everything in our regulator now comes as one unit within our regulator. All incidents, all the rest of it comes to them, and they're triaged out of that one central processing place. What it drives is a consistent approach. It's easy to navigate through. Some of these are online, and you'll always come back to that same point to that as well. But what it does is that there's no more silo of that inspector knows your mine site, he knows the incidents occurring at that one there, and they've reported to him. This is visible to our whole organisation above, that they're all in the one system, all in the one place, and everybody knows the incidents that everybody is seeing now, as opposed to very siloed to an inspector. The other thing we did as well as part of that change is we don't have inspectors assigned to coal mines or any other mine we have in the valley now, or any other place in the state. We have areas. You're in the coal sector, you've got the whole state within the coal. We rotate our inspectors through all the different sites, and for a number of reasons. One is capture, like the perceived capture that I come to your site all the time, I know you, you know what I drink, it's a nice cup of coffee, etc. Through to introducing other people actually gets to see different hazards, and if you see it in yourself, if you go out in the field, if somebody else different to you have never seen that particular thing anymore, they're likely to pick up something you haven't because you're now in tune that that's just your workplace. I call it like driving to work. You can drive to work every day of the week. At some point in time, you probably don't even recognise the road sign you drive past now. And by doing that to our inspector as well is that we bring the multidisciplinary people into those ones. They get to see different stuff that the normal inspector who went there every day wouldn't see as well. The other thing we did was we also went to react activity as well. We took a focus on it as well. So what we want to be in as a regulator is in the proactive space for New South Wales. That is where we find the bang for our buck. And what I mean by proactive is this is before we have events. So we want to make sure, for us it's principal hazards and MUEs are in place. We want to go out there and make sure mines have that in place and they're effectively managed before you have that event. And we spend most of our activities, about 80% of our activities are spent in that proactive space of doing program plans and planned assessments. On the reactive space, so I talked back about the intervention part of it, we get all the data in, which is from those planned assessments and all the rest of the assessments and notices and incidents, we get that into our system. And that we add into our system is the reactive part of our approach is compliance priorities. So we look forward and back. So we look back for the last 6 months, what was the trends in industry, and for the next 6 months, then we put a compliance priority report in, which then goes and turns around to, that's what we go focus for the next 6 months. We generally have about 3 compliance priorities on top of our normal program plans that we go focus on. For our last ones, we had supervision and stuff like that because we saw in the field that there was either an ineffective supervision or just a lack of supervision. So that embedded in our next program plan for a compliance priority, and we went and focused that as well. So by having that approach for us, it allows us to be mainly proactive, but also and react actually to things that are occurring in industry. But back to the 3 pillars, you need to have quality data to be able to do that. Otherwise, it's an unknown. Critical controls and assessment. So on the introduction of this as well, so part of our business is that our first pass is we set up like a TAP team, we'll call it, and a targeted assessment program team that went out and just focused on critical controls for either principal hazards or control plans. And the idea was the inception of is that as part of our review as being risk-based, where's the best bang for your buck again? And as a regulator, we come to your site, we're there 4 or 5 hours of the day. What do we need to see for a particular MUE or a hazard in that instance? Our first pass, which was, what could I say, horrendous, essentially. And I guess it's the lessons I want to put across to you is that how you start and how you finish your journey of this as well. Overly complicated for us, very detailed, it's like a niche kind of people could understand it, very document headers and parts of it. Audit focus, essentially, is just follow the bouncing ball through, and time-intensive carrot assessment. These things took us about 3 days on your site to go through. 1 day the paperwork, next day paperwork, and we'll go out in the field for a couple of hours on the last day. We didn't progress that one just because it just was never going to cut the mustard for us, and we just don't have the resources to focus on it. Second time round, so I will say we're up to 3rd one at the moment, but it's always a work in progress, is that we looked at target assessment programs on regards to the principal hazards, essentially. So in New South Wales legislation, we have still prescribed, because we run two different legislations still. We have the Work Health and Safety Act, the REG, the Mines Petroleum Act and regs. And what that has in that is principal hazards that are prescribed, along with schedules that you have to take in consideration. So most of the schedules, let's say it's for roads and other vehicle operating area, might have 20 things you must take into consideration when you develop those plans. Our first lot of our target assessment program focused heavily on those hazards identified in the legislation. So essentially it was a check sheet. We pulled out the schedule, we went to the mine site, we asked you, do you have a risk assessment? Tick. Did you consult? Tick. And you worked your way down the list of things. Did you take consider this, the speed, the truck, the rest of it? We rolled that across the whole one. And wrongly or rightly, it's a good outcome. It's a good learning tool for mines, because what it did, because this was introduction to new legislation as well, is that our audit tool was literally what you had to do to comply with the schedule. And we made sure you went from top to bottom, you did your risk assessment, you focused on how to eliminate the controls through to you covered off in the schedules. It was very systematic, but what it didn't do is actually check the effectiveness in the field, because it was such a document-heavy focus, one of it. So the pros and cons, it did allow us to collect a lot of data on that. So we have a system in the work, pretty much everything goes into our one system. All these gets loaded back up through it. It'll analyse the data for us. It gives you a table of how you scored in that particular hazard. And we got a lot of data from that to where mines were travelling at that point in time. Allow the production of reports. So where, as you see in New South Wales, we publish a lot of reports. And it's a part of our open and transparent approach that's why we collect the data. So if we're going to collect data, why we're not putting a report, because it's just useless data for anybody. And do I really need to know the data, or is it industry that needs to know the data, especially when it comes to incident trends and what they're seeing? So our approach is that what we put in is what we put out. So if we go to a program plan, we'll run a report. We send one to the mine, particularly on their own one that we did there, and then we send out an industry one at the end of the program plan as well, so they all know how they fared along the way with that as well. The other thing we did focus on quite well we did focus on the principal hazard and control plans, which was, as I said, is a good thing at the time, because that they were new to industry, and that was a thing to new change about what came into force as well. And more importantly to us, the best thing that came out of it was we were able to repeat it from site to site, from inspector to inspector. It's literally, we're going to ask you the same questions, and we're going to expect similar answers from you as well. And in that way, we treated everybody fair and consistently, but also what it did there was have the data was consistent as well for us as well. So if we're asking you a question, do you have a risk assessment? The answer is no, you don't have one. Well, you can't answer too many different ways. It's a consistent approach, it's repeatable, and it gets that mindset of we're not going to treat you all differently, and I'm not going to target you because I didn't like working at BHP, and I'm not, over here is even better because Rio, I haven't worked for you yet, and it's so good. But again, and it takes out that approach from us as a regulator too, without being told that we're either captured as well. Cons, I guess, heavily, as I mentioned, it was heavily document based. Like I sat through some of these myself as an inspector, and it was whole days in the office, like going through the paperwork. It's great, tick it through, safety management system, roll the way through. Good and bad, but it was heavily one of the bad ones. For them out of the process identified through risks of the control, given the time undertaken above, the field time was reduced. That was the biggest significant loss we saw, was if you send out, and we've got a limited amount of numbers there, and you become document heavily focused as a regulator in the field, you don't spend time on the front line where the people are exposed to those hazards, and you can't see if those controls have been implemented effectively as well. So you miss that part of it. Yes, the upper level systems are going to be in place that you'll need to have done that, but what we miss out is the opportunity to be out more time in the field, spending it with people to go, are you aware of this control? And, have you implemented it, and what would you do about that if anything happened? And worst but not least, I guess the last one was, well, the two of the ones were, most of the ones we were checking weren't deemed as critical in that process because it's heavily documentation. A risk assessment itself is not a critical control. It's just a piece of paper that may identify them. Through to that we were still seeing the same amount of incidents, essentially. It did not shift the bar. All we did was got a lot better data out of it and a lot better reporting from the whole process. Review and continual improvement, and it's one of those things of that there is probably where we are today, and we will continue to be so because it's a moving target of you can never stop what you're doing and think that you've landed to where the outcome is. And this whole process of review and continual improvement, we now will run a program plan. If it didn't get the outcome that we wanted, like there was a change in either the frequency of incident or the severity of those incidents, we'll stop, review, see what the questions we got wrong, change our approach and go back at it and do it again. Because you can't sit there and not continue to improve it to get a better outcome. Because we are here for safety and we all want everybody in this industry to go home safely. If we're not achieving that by what we're going to ask you, we're wasting our time, we're wasting your time. So the continual improvements model is something that we've embedded in ourselves. Is we literally run a program plan, get to the end, review the outcome, start again, if it was effective or not. And I was saying in that time as well, going out and finding something wrong and something that was a critical control is not something that's a bad thing from a regulator point of view as well. Because what it does give us is all satisfaction is that something like a strata fire, an underground coal mine, is being well managed and not seeing those incidents. It's actually a good outcome and people are doing the right thing and we make sure they're doing the right thing by being there. So having no bad outcome is actually a good one for us as well. So the review done, basic intervention strategy is what we kicked off. I think I kicked this off about a year ago, I think. It's a bit probably longer than that as well. So against that intervention strategy, and it's pretty much were we meeting the intent of our strategy? And if you look at it, even just the title alone will say incident prevention. And if we weren't doing that, then clearly we couldn't have met what our strategy was then. So we need to review and then constantly improve as a regulator and that to make sure everybody does go home safely, as it says. We went through the whole lot of it. Our focused risk-based approach on critical controls was based on the ICCM model. So this is basically, I think Christian talked about it as well. We adopted that model as part of intervention strategy as well. The other one was, were we interpreting our data correctly about part of that review as well? We got a lot of data in, but what was it telling us, and more importantly, where was it heading us to, and how could that inform our decision-making as a regulator as well to where we put the focal points on? And we were doing what we had documented. Basically, for our own self, we're walking the talk, essentially. If we're going to go out and say we're going to do this, are we actually doing what we say we're going to do? And I'll say from a regular point, it's a challenging thing to come look at yourself, to have a real hard look at yourself and say, am I an effective person? Are my system effective now? And it is a hard thing to do, but it's a reflection of the workforce as well and the maturity of your own workforce as well to be able to do that too. But what we found, so the data we're collecting was not quality data essentially. We had a horrendous amount of data, and if anybody's used data in a system, the moment you have a free text field is pretty much the crappiest data you'll ever get out of a system if you want to try to duplicate it. It is pretty much, that's a data point. I spell caterpillar, caterpillar, all the ways they used to spell it in our system, new data point. So it's almost impossible to use it without a lot of manipulation in the system to try to link them all together to get something that's quality that we could use to inform our decision making. The process was well documented for ourselves as well, so essentially, how do I get from here to there effectively and make sure the inspector's doing their job and find your gaps where that's not documented properly, because what you need to is have a documented, repeatable approach that everybody knows and everybody can follow. And our approach was fundamentally based on principal hazards. So what we unpacked that was, the initial intent was critical controls, but at some point in time we'd morphed to a point of, the easiest approach is just go through the principal hazards and the legislation and do an audit checklist. It's quite simple, it's all listed out for you, you just follow the bouncy ball from A to B. Improvement. So we developed a documented approach about identification of critical controls. And Christian talking this earlier about I'll call it his blue line. This is the blue line for us as a regulator. So we sat as a regulator, our entire regulator workforce was involved in this process, that we drew the line to where we want it as a regulator. And that was based on all the data we see, because we got a lot of data, a lot of previous history of incidents, the rest of it. And we use that fundamental methodologies back there as well. It was important for that, because to bring our people along for the journey for this is that we started off with training and what this meant to them. What does a critical control look like? What's the fundamentals of it? Develop the procedure of it. And then we got all through that process as well. And then we literally started on the journey of actually starting at the start to identify what we class as a material unwanted event as a regulator. So as per a very big sheet of things, that is that what you have to do when you go through this process is wrongly or rightly set your decision-making checklist up for a critical control. We had our own developed with the ICCM model and that, but this sets the foundation of how you repeat what you're going to do over and over again. And you've got to be able to repeat it because it can't be a moving pathway. The decision checklist that. So we developed all this, ran through our entire workforce before we kicked off the process of identifying what we're going to go check as a regulator. So, to kick off that process after that, you've heard him talk about the broad brush risk assessment. As a regulator, we went and did a high-level broad brush risk assessment as ourselves to see identified all those material and unwanted events that we wanted to go tackle through our proactive assessment programs as a group of people. We end up identifying about 22 then total for us. That's what we found. And we end up doing those bow ties based on that as well. And from that, because we're a regulator, we identified and we did control definitions, which is a document part of that component. And the CAA is also the in-field one as well. So then out of the bow ties and out of the critical controls, we developed a check sheet of what we're going to go check out in the field with a scoring on it so we can be consistent when we come out to you. We want to see if you've got this critical control in place. A lot of it's yes or no, you comply or don't. When you go down the lines of compliant, not compliant, it literally drives out a regulatory enforcement approach against the thing as well. But more importantly is what we want you to see that's critical to us as a business based on that we only have a limited time on site and allows us to spend more time in the field to make sure those controls are effective and they've been implemented in your field as well. We did put a caveat on no more than 10 questions in each. We've landed about between 5 and 6. I like the Christian one at 5, but it was like a bridge too far from when we had like 50 on some of the other ones, and some people like the checklist from A to B because it's easy to follow. No more than 10 was a thing, because the logic is that if there's more than 10, you've sort of lost the point. How critical could it be if you've got 10 more things you need to check in both in the desktop and the other one? And how can people remember all that too? Think about who we want to know what that control is as the person in the field. So it can't be overly complicated to remember it day in and day out as well. System data. So this was my little thing about we reviewed our system and data collection. And basically the poo emoji pretty much sums it up, equals the same out. And that's what we found. We just had massive amounts of data, like 10 years worth of data that you almost need a degree on how to analyse it, let alone try to get it out of our system. It's just so much of it, what do you do with it? And because we're a regulator for the state, it's for everything. A mine site is probably not as bad, but for us as a regulator, every single last one come in there, and then it just got dumped in the big pile of mess. So what we did was to try to tidy up our system is back to my reference list thing about it's one of the big things that changed we did is that if you want crap data, put free text in. What we end up establishing based on all our data in the past is reference list to all our critical controls, notices, stuff like that. So it's a drop-down field. So you can only pick this drop-down, select it, and it's consistent data across the board. And we set our system up to match that as well. The other thing we did was, and to be a risk-based legislator, we linked the system together internally. So if you have an incident come through for a road incident, and we wrote a notice on it, and we did an assessment program on it, and they're all negative, it actually adds to the risk profile of the mine site to say how you're travelling in that either potential hazard or material unwanted event as well. So what that drives for us as well is that as a regulator, we can then, when we run a program plan, focus on the sites that are having all the incidents, so we can go and address that. And the other thing it does is, for other ones that are coming problematic as well, or we're seeing a trend in them, it informs our compliance priority effectively as well, because it's all the data sitting there linked together going, you've got a problem, you're seeing all these people getting run into or whatever it is, linked together in our system, it flags up straight away. System data collection, it's a lot of word on there, it's pretty much as well. We do collect a lot of data because we are a regulator, unfortunately. I did touch on this as well, but basically again that informs our regulatory field and response and emerging issues. We run panels as well as a regulator as well, so for us we have incidents come in that we review every 24 hours. Any incident come to our organisation as a leadership team, we sit down in the morning, we go through them, we have a triage system how we treat them. Anything that requires any further response, whether it's an emerging trend or anything, gets flagged to, we call it a review committee, and then we assign resources such as compliance priorities, we tack on other stuff to our program plans, or we may just send somebody straight out to look at it as well, based on what we're seeing of all the data we're getting onto. So it's allowed us to basically, I guess, react to the actual trends that we're seeing more efficiently and more time efficiently. So we're not 6 months, 12 months down the track trying to address an issue that's live now. And part of that process is that we link notices. We write your notice, it links all together, essentially, in our system. The outcome. So for us, a well-documented, repeatable and defendable process. We get challenged all the time. Our triaging system gets challenged all the time. Why do you triage things? Why don't you go to some incidents? How do you respond to that? More importantly, why don't we go to some things? And think of the numbers. If we've got a whole state and we've got 60 people and we've got thousands of mines to get to, yeah, you've got to prioritise, and this is what this approach does for us. It's well documented, it's repeatable, and we can defend ourselves of why I didn't go to a tier 3 quarry has 1 or 2 people operating every now and then too. All the MU and supporting ones, so what we did is the CDA, CAs and completion are all mapped back to our bow tie, so it all links back to our risk framework. It's very pretty much document driven as an outcome focus. It's good for reports, it's good for trends, it's good for incidents as well. And again, when you start off on this journey about when you're going to get out of critical controls is how are you going to manage that in your own systems at work to make sure that they're actually implemented. And that's what you need to put your mind to of you'll get all this information, but what are you going to do with it? And more importantly, how do you want to reflect up, especially to the people above you who want to see this stuff as well. So keep the end in mind for when your system is, because what you'll find is what we did in the first place, a lot of data doesn't mean quality data, and what do you do with it means a lot of work for no real gain. One of the best outcomes we got with this is, but by changing that approach, that desktop went to us for worst case, it's about 3-4 hours, worst case scenario, and all the rest of the time in the field. So we swapped from about an 80-20 for 80% documentation focus to 20% field to now 80% field and 20% pretty much on the documentation part of it as well. Also frees you up time to be more reactive with those other compliance priorities we see through the data we're getting as well, and react to other things as well, because now we've freed ourselves up time to focus on what's really critical to safety in industry as well. Ultimately for us, but we kicked off that and we started going through the new lots of program plans at the start of the year. We run on a 3-yearly cycle. As I said, we run 6 months program plans that are locked in. Compliance priorities run 6 monthly as well. Review, reset after every 6 months in our planning cycle now as well as part of that. And that's about it for me, really. Like, my thing is pretty much, I guess, showing you through the journey we went through, and hopefully you can learn from some of us of don't overly complicate something if it doesn't need to be. Like, what is really critical to your own business, and focus on those key points of it. You still have to do your risk management and have the other hazards and that, but what is really critical and how do you want to manage that? Questions?
Right, I'll go on. I think you mentioned this morning you have seen a reduction, but I'll let you answer that.
And reduction of?
Fatalities.
Yeah, so we don't get too many fatalities. I'll say the last ones are very, I think I went to one of the last ones and it's literally like, it's back to my thing about what do you expect that person to know on that? And like one of the ones was like, why would you not wear a harness, for an example? Like, it's a quite simple thing to do. Why is that person not putting that harness on when you're standing effectively like 400 metres above the bottom? Most, but our principal hazard and all those critical ones, we don't really see too many of them at all now. Like, I don't, Lightning Ridge, because anybody's seen opal hunters and that, like we get to look after that place as well. We did see a few there, but the same logic applies there, that they were just, why would you do that? But from a major point of view, we haven't seen fatalities like that. Like even our roads and stuff, it's a big focus for us, but we're not seeing the fatalities based on, we're looking at what's critical to the person doesn't get killed now. Do we still see incidents? Yeah, we do still see incidents, but the outcome's not the same now. And it's a thing, reminder of that. If you're seeing incidents, that's a bad thing, because some people are reporting it, of course it is an incident, it's a good time to get it before it's actually led into a major one. But if the outcome's not bad, we're actually achieving part of our goal anyway.
A question from the floor here, Dwaine. Knowing what you now know, what would you have done differently in New South Wales to get where you are today?
What would I do differently? Well, it's a tough question, and I think it's one of those journeys you go on is about it depends what lens you want. Do you want to make sure the mine adapts to the new legislation, have a safety management system? And if that's your focus, then the audit check sheet's a great one. But if you really want to be an effective regulator and focus on those key risk ones, probably the latter, what we're doing now, is more effective. So it's a tough one, and it's hard to get right, but I'm not sure there's a wrong and right for doing both, because one has a logical outcome. If I go and make sure that I now train you, which that's what I'm essentially doing, to put your mind to how to do a risk assessment, how to consult with people, and how to engage in content expert, and to write a principal hazard management plan and the procedures that drop out of that, should drive that behaviour. And I'm not sure you can jump from here to there to where we've done about going through the middle. There's no wrong and right. If you've got an effective system in place, which as a regulator we didn't, because we're not the mine itself, and I think we could jump to the end as a regulator, but as a business I think it's one of your own journeys of where you currently sit in a risk part of it to where you want to be in the future, and where's your focus point want to be, essentially. But if your system's not there, probably going to have to do the middle one we did and go through the whole thing through to the end. Yeah. It will flush out the critical controls as you go.
No shortcuts, essentially.
Substantially.
Yeah. Good to know. Dwaine, thank you so much. Thank you for the couple of questions that came forward from the floor as well. Dwaine Jones has been good enough to share his insights from New South Wales. Thank you.